This is the YMB and BTC podcast.
Cryptocurrency decrypted.
Welcome to episode 78. To kick things off this week, we're chatting about the Bitcoin stress test that was run just a few days ago. CoinWallet.eu decided to broadcast a huge number of Bitcoin transactions over several hours in order to analyze the network's capacity. We'll discuss the motives behind the test, how the results could affect the Bitcoin block size debate, and much more. Then later in the show, we'll be joined by two special guests and close friends who have heard lots about Bitcoin but have never actually used it. We'll do our best to respond to several questions they have about Bitcoin inflation, the Bitcoin price, how to spend Bitcoin, and similar topics. Your hosts today are just Tim Baker and myself, Daniel Brown. Here we go. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. This is kind of a special show. This is the YMB and BTC podcast. I am Daniel Brown, and I'm here with
Tim Baker.
So the reason it's special, we've recorded in the same room a few times before. Actually, maybe just once or twice, but Tim and I are in fact, we're sitting at the same table, but we're actually outside.
It's amazing. It's like Wi-Fi actually gets outside.
Yeah, we're actually outside just for fun, honestly. I don't know what, there's some trickling water in the background. There might be some planes flying over. I have no idea how this audio is going to be, but we'll figure it out. I'll figure it out. Tim's a lazy fuck. He doesn't figure anything out.
I'm just too stupid.
So, interesting topic today. This all kind of happened over the space of about 2 or 3 days. There's a website, CoinWallet.eu, and they announced it says June 20th, so that would have been last Saturday. We're recording on a Tuesday, and you'll hear this on the Thursday. Isn't that fun and confusing? But anyway, they announced that they did do a stress test on the Bitcoin network. And, I mean, this was really interesting because we did the episode, I don't know, 4 or 5 episodes ago. I say this all the time, a few episodes ago. I should probably give the actual number sometime so that people can actually look it up, because they'll probably be too lazy to look it up because I'm too lazy to look it up. So anyway, the point is, few episodes ago, maybe I'll link it in the show notes. I don't know. We talked about the whole 1 megabyte versus 20 megabytes debate, it's honestly blowing up these days. I mean, it's all over Twitter, and people are snapping at each other about what we should be arguing about, and should we up the block size limit. Well, yeah, I guess I'll start with that. If you don't know, it really just boils down pretty simply. It's just the size of a block. Is it going to be 1 megabyte or 20 megabytes? How many transactions are we going to fit into blocks? And then, obviously, it gets a lot more complicated when people start analyzing it and saying, well, how much are people going to be affected? What are the wallets going to have to do? And all kinds of stuff. But this whole test is kind of some new evidence. They ran a stress test. They put a whole bunch of transactions through the network in the space of 32 hours or something?
Yeah.
And the results were interesting. I mean, part of the test was to see if we could recover once we started reaching capacity. And I guess that has happened, right? I mean, everything's still fine. Nothing broke.
Yeah, I mean, they did only get a small percentage of what they wanted to send through before their own servers crashed.
Oh, interesting. Okay, that's really interesting. I mean, I guess it's just their own. I mean, if you try and push that many transactions through at once, then yeah, sure, that takes a lot of work.
Yeah, they were only able to send about 15% of their original amount that they wanted to test it.
Okay, so that is pretty interesting, because it kind of says that it would take a lot of work to reach the limit. But I mean, when you're talking about the entire network as opposed to just this one website, we still could reach the limit because everybody's going to be doing transactions at once. But in a way, it is a reminder that we're not at the limit yet, and to reach the limit is going to take a good deal of effort and transactions and stuff. So anyway, so the recovery was fine. I mean, Bitcoin's there. We're rolling along just fine. Nothing's wrong. But it was interesting. They basically realized through the results, they really did see some long transaction times. I'm looking at an analysis by Multibit, which they have a Bitcoin wallet. So they were able to analyze the transactions from their own wallets, and they're able to see, well, with this level of fee, how long did it take for transactions to confirm? And they have a couple different levels here, but kind of the standard fee, which is 10,000 Satoshis or 0.1 millibits. I mean, everything works differently, but that's kind of the one I see the most, is just 0.1 millibit. And even those, it says they were taking an average of 9 blocks to get mined, which, I mean, that's a while. I mean, it's probably happened to me before, especially, I don't like to spend any fees at all, honestly, because I'm a cheapskate. Let's say it one more time on the show. I'm a cheapskate, and if my wallet gives me the option of not including a fee, I'm not going to do it unless it's an important transaction. Anyway, yeah, even the standard fee was taking 9 blocks to confirm, and anything lower than that, there were some it was saying were taking 87 blocks. What is that, like 13 hours or something? So yeah, that's kind of what it comes down to, is there really is a limit, and if we reach it, some interesting things could happen. I mean, people always make the argument, well, people will just raise their fees, and that's fine. Maybe they'll do that, and maybe it'll work, but still, then you got to pay more. That's a problem too, if you have to be paying a lot more. I mean, it just depends how you look at it. Maybe you're willing to spend the money. Maybe you want a smaller group of Bitcoiners who are able to spend more money. That's something to consider, but it's higher fees, and that's part of the equation. So,
I mean, well, what do you think this means for what the blockchain can do? I mean, I guess we never really come up and ask, like, what do you think they should do? Like, are you one of the people who thinks they should just increase the block size? Actually, I think we have said it before, probably.
Yeah, I mean, we have said that. I will say that, like I said earlier, I didn't realize when we recorded that show how big of a debate this was, and I didn't realize there were that many people on the other side of the debate. I thought, I mean, we did the article by Mike Hearn, and I thought it was just pretty clear. He's like, oh yeah, let's just do it, and everything will be fine. But now I realize, there are a lot of people on the other side of the debate. I haven't read their arguments very much. I mean, I've just seen random bits here and there on Twitter. So I wouldn't say definitively that I'm for raising it. Based on what I've read so far, it makes sense. But to be honest, I'm not sure where I fall yet.
Do you think that this kind of, the test, because they didn't actually finish the test, but then they did make some statements based on it. According to them, like we said before, they only did 15% of the transactions until their own servers crashed. That wasn't any problem outside of their own, but they said that when the Bitcoin network is flooded with transactions at a particular fee level, transactions with lower fees do not get confirmed in a timely manner. I mean, that's pretty much cut and dried what they saw, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure why it would be any different.
I mean, does that change if you make the block size different?
Oh, no. I mean, that is important, I guess. I mean, 20 megabytes is 20 times as big, but that's still a limit. And theoretically, that could become a problem eventually too, and the exact same problems could arise. And that actually is a tough thing. I mean, because, yeah, what if that does happen eventually? I mean, maybe by then there'll be like payment channels and stuff, but I remember I do remember this episode number for some weird reasons. It was episode 25. We had Edward Castronova, the author of Wildcat Currency, and I remember I read his book, and he talked all about inflation and how you kind of want like a mild level of inflation and, the standard kind of economist idea. And I remember asking him about, Bitcoin, because it's deflationary, and what does he think about that? And he basically said, well, there is value in that. As long as everything is set, as long as you can see, every 10 minutes on average, you're going to get this many Bitcoins that are inflated or added to the economy. And if you can see all the way down to the year 2140, when we're finally going to quit creating new coins, he said there is value in knowing what's going to happen and in knowing that nothing's going to change. And that could be an important part of this debate too. I mean, you could easily say that it's a bad thing to just manipulate the network at will. I mean, we harass the bankers for manipulating stuff all the time.
Well, yeah, there's that thing about them always saying about raising the debt ceiling. Is if your house is flooding, you just raise the ceiling because it's going to keep on going up. And but like, it is probably just me being biased towards it not being government, but I don't see that as much with raising it, because it's less of just saying that we're not going to take on more debt. It's just like, we don't actually have this limitation. It's a fake limitation as far as the block size. So why not just make it bigger to make things simpler? But I also don't understand it enough, or to the same level as like other people do, who might say that we should stay at the smaller limit.
Right. Yeah, I agree that I don't understand everything. No, I mean, I don't know if anybody ever will. But yeah, I mean, I guess obviously there's value on each side, but I still would just stand by the fact that there is value in knowing what's going to happen and when things will change, if they're going to change. And this is manipulation, and there could be people out there with gigantic mining farms running all this analysis based on when they're going to mine, how much they're going to mine, and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden, somebody changes one little rule by a factor of 20. That is a huge factor. And who knows how many people it could affect. And if I was one of those miners, it could stink. Now, maybe there's arguments to say that, oh, well, the miners won't be affected at all. You never know. It's interesting, and I don't really know.
So yeah, the test that they did, they were having 10 Bitcoin servers that would send transactions at 2 per second, each approximately 3 kilobytes in size, and each sending the 10 to 20 addresses. Outputs from those transactions, totaling larger transactions of around 15 to 30 kilobytes, would then be combined and sent back to the original servers. Like we said before, a lot of those failed because they had some crash. I mean, their own servers crashed during the whole thing. I don't really know what that says about CoinWallet as far as how trustworthy their servers are.
Yeah. What even is CoinWallet? Is it just a kind of like blockchain? Is it just a web wallet?
They're called by this article on CoinDesk a Bitcoin brokerage. And they had been planning the stress test for June 22nd, whatever, and they had told people on Reddit and stuff like that. So a few people were making comments about them doing it as like an attack, but it seemed like I hadn't really heard about it, but I also don't keep that close a track on stuff like this. It seemed like they had put enough of a warning out there that this wasn't anything malicious.
Yeah, no, I would not come close to the opinion that they were trying to be malicious or anything, but it still is interesting to think that someone would just come out and just do this, to just say, oh, hey, by the way, we're about to flood the entire network just for the heck of it. I mean, I don't think it was a problem. I think it's within their right to do that, but it is an interesting decision, definitely.
Well, it's obviously within their right. I mean, I think this goes to show that, like, a lot of people say that something like this, like Bitcoin, that it's not a centralized government thing. How are people going to test it? There isn't going to be a central, like, thing to make sure that things work. But even whenever you say that people aren't going to do things, I think it helps to have an idealist thing behind it, that we want to see if this works. And they say something about the testing. They did kind of come into it with a little bit of a bias to try to show that the smaller block size was inadequate for conducting all this stuff. But
no, I don't know if that's what they were trying to show. I think that's what they were trying to find out.
Well, it says, yeah, it's a CoinDesk article again saying the original intention was to flood the Bitcoin network with transactions to see if the current 1 megabyte block size was adequate at such volume if the network could recover quickly from a surge. So, I mean, that does follow more with what Daniel said.
I do like backing up a step or two. That's a really good point about kind of the network analyzing itself and keeping an eye on itself and testing itself. I mean, this is definitely a fringe case. I mean, it would be hard to directly extend this to like anything that has to do with the government, but that still is it is a cool thing to point out that it is a network without a government, and it does keep track of itself. It does test itself, and it does try to improve itself. So I do like that point.
Well, okay, no, it does say, it said that their stated aim, and there's a link here that I'll look at, but their stated aim was to demonstrate that the 1 megabyte block size is inadequate if Bitcoin has become anything more than a costly science project. So I think they did have some kind of a bias, but I mean, you're always going to have a bias, so I don't think that really rules it out.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, you're right. If that is what they were trying to prove, then fine. But even then, if they're right, then good. They proved it, and now we know we got to up the limit. If they're wrong, then nothing broke, because them being wrong means that the network survived just fine. Or I think even if we did hit the limit, it would survive, but it went through the test relatively fine. Now, here's an interesting thing to consider is part of the network slowing down means that during those 32 hours it was supposed to be, maybe less if they crashed, during that time, there were real people out there trying to do transactions who were affected. They either took a really long time, or maybe they had to spend more money. Any morality issues there? Do you think it's a low move for them to say, oh, yeah, we're just going to spend a few hours, mess with the network, and it's going to cost you time and or money? Is that I mean, they gave a warning, but, 2 days.
I mean, but if you're going to test it, you're going to test it. You kind of have to test when people are going to be using it. That's what people talk about when they're saying that it's hard to fix Bitcoin because it's like trying to repair an economy. While they compare it to like a plane in flight because you're trying to fix it and not screw over a bunch of people who have a fuck ton of money in it.
Well, yeah, and to be honest, that might be another argument for just leave it at 1 megabyte, right? I mean, it's the same thing. Like, it's not just something that's in motion; it's an economy. Everybody is invested in this. I mean, not everybody, but a lot of people are heavily invested in this, not just for fun, but it's their money, it's their livelihood. So do you think that would push anybody in the direction, just leave it alone? Because there are people out there with a serious stake here.
Yeah, I can see people doing that. I don't know how much I don't have enough information to know that really changes anything by just increasing the block size. I think that even though the test failed and you can say that they didn't really finish it, it still slowed it down even at 15% of their original test. So I think that does say that there's an argument for increasing the block size.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically, there is a risk to adjusting the network, sure. But by increasing it to 20 megabytes, that will increase the capacity of the network vastly, obviously, 20 times, right? And so if you do have a stake in Bitcoin, and if now we can see that it can't grow very much, then I guess you're right. It would say, well, okay, there's a risk to increasing the limit, but if we do it, we're going to be able to reach 20 times as many people, and my stake is going to become that much more valuable. So yeah, I guess the point is that, sure, you have a stake, but if you want it to survive and if you want it to grow, then let's increase the limit, I guess would be the argument.
I mean, we were talking about it before, and you kind of mentioned it. How doesn't that affect the miners if the blockchain, if the size gets increased? Wouldn't that mean that it takes longer? I sound like an idiot, but doesn't that mean that it takes longer for blocks to be mined then?
No.
Okay, exactly. See, okay, so why not do it? I mean, we keep on saying we need to look up other people's opinions. We never do. But the general consensus is that it's stupid, but that kind of does normally scare me when like everyone's just like, yeah, just increase it, whatever. I mean, but like thinking about it now, like without us looking at articles, what do you think could be the problem from that?
I would say number one is what I just said. The network works. Let's leave it alone. There's value in knowing how it's going to go, and we don't want to mess with it. I would say that could be number one, but again, who knows what kind of technical analysis is out there. And this actually is an interesting aspect of this test is because this test did not really involve the free market, right? In this test, except for a few people who were trying to send transactions at the right time, and maybe they said, oh, my transaction's not going through, I'll raise the fee. I mean, maybe that happened with a few people, but not across the entire network. And so, it too is just the free market saying, well, the network okay by just raising our fees if we need a faster transaction. the argument for not just that we should leave it alone, but in spite of this test, they could say, well, leave it alone, the free market will take care of it. Even though this test failed, situation, the free market, they'll raise fees and everything will be fine.
After telling Daniel not to look it up and to make his own opinion, I then looked it up and didn't form my own opinion as to why we shouldn't do it. And really, most of the ones I found were just that Bitcoin, we don't want to mess with it. It could mess things up. It's not really a solid thing. I don't know. I keep on going back to that. It's like something we can pretty easily change. And it's not like it doesn't make it better besides just making it so that it's more people can use it, which I'm not normally necessarily for. It's just I don't see the point of not really doing it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, it's one little number. And again, I mean, the miners, it's kind of tough. You never really know. You can't predict everything. But at face value, it does. It seems really simple, and it's one little number. And even if it does affect some miners, I mean, they can adjust. Just like the network adjusted, so can the miners. And even when the number changes, it changes for everybody. So if it affects one miner, I mean, maybe it depends on how big of a mining operation it is, but still, if it changes for everybody, and so everybody's still more or less on an equal footing. So if it hurts a big miner, it's going to hurt the other big miners too, and they'll adjust and figure things out. So
I think more the fear is not that they won't adjust, and it's that they'll all kind of just decide it's not worth it anymore if something happens. I don't know what would happen, but just that it wouldn't be worth it for them to run their mining things anymore. The network would lose a lot of its support. Instead of getting more people in, it would look just really shitty to everyone else.
I know what you're saying, and if big miners did drop out, I could see why that would be a problem. But 20 megabytes, I mean, the block limit doesn't change a whole lot. Really, all it changes is how many transactions can you put into one block. And so, yeah, I can see if miners dropped out, that's a problem, fine. But I can't see what about this would convince them to drop out.
Yeah, I think that's what it's just that people are wondering. Like, they're saying, why are we messing with this? Too many people's money are involved. I think just from a...
Yeah, no, again, it's change. It's change, and you never know. That's kind of what it comes down to.
I don't know. I think, like, as far as that goes, even if it does, like, destroy it, like, I don't see it gaining as much of a... Like, being able to move forward with it starts to cost more. Like, it's still decentralized, it's still different than PayPal, but you start putting all the fees on it, and it really is going to lose a lot of its allure or whatever for a lot of people. So, like, I completely understand the free market thing. I remember when we first started talking about it, we were like, well, that does sound weird. You're kind of messing with Bitcoin, and it's supposed to not be controlled by everybody. But again, if it's a hard fork, and it doesn't seem like there's no hard evidence for the people who say don't switch. Like you were talking about morally speaking before. I don't see anything morally wrong with a hard fork. I don't see anything wrong with what CoinWallet did here. They were testing the network. It's not anyone's network. They can do whatever they want with it. They want to flood it with a bunch of transactions, and even if it was malicious, it's like it's not malicious as such. It's just like it's a blockchain. We all kind of use it for transactions. If you get slowed down, okay.
Yeah, no, I mean, if you're free to use it to pay for your coffee or silver or whatever, then you're right. It is a public network, and if I want to use it to send 1 million transactions to myself, then fine. I sort of have that right. But another thing I would point out is that even if if they changed it and it completely failed, or if they didn't change it and it completely failed, well, either way, that's a learning opportunity, right? And it's incredibly easy to create an altcoin, and we'll just go and we'll say, hey, okay, if it fails, wow, we really shouldn't have done that. Let's make another one and do it right this time, right?
Yeah. You're saying if you increase the block size and then we all get fucked over.
Either way, if we do it and we get fucked over, or if we don't do it and the capacity ruins everything.
Yeah, I mean, we already have the technology. It's just hard to build that kind of trust in something before. And also, you have Bitcoin fall out. And I'm not saying it's any different. It's just a lot of people are going to lose a lot of money. And a lot of people aren't going to want to get into a new technology because they're too attached to the idea of it. Like, them being owed money for going into it and going into it early and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. But if it was a serious enough problem with Bitcoin, then if people really saw how to solve it, yeah, it would take time and you'd have to build trust and everything. But again, it's Bitcoin started from nothing, and whatever's better, that we talk about it all the time. Bitcoin, it would be tough, but it can be replaced if something's really better. And if Bitcoin falls apart, then there are going to be other things that really are better, and something will spring to the top. I mean, even now when Bitcoin is fine, there are other currencies that are sort of competing with it. Not a ton, but they're out there and they're options for people. So if Bitcoin did fail, it'd be real easy for something else to just jump in and people would say, all right, let's go. I mean, I think.
I don't know. I haven't really paid that much attention to altcoins recently. I mean, I've heard a little bit about Darkcoin, although it's renamed now, but it's, Dashcoin. I really haven't heard anything about Litecoin for a long time.
Yeah, Litecoin is just as weird. It's just there and people have it and whatever, they hang on to it, I guess, because they feel like it. But no, I agree. I don't pay a ton of attention to altcoins, but still, I mean, they're there and they're options that people use is all I'm saying. And they work, you know.
So overall, are you happy with CoinWallet doing this?
Oh yeah. No. That's a good point. Yeah. I absolutely. When I first saw that, I'm like, holy crap, somebody's actually testing this to see what would happen. I think it's a great idea. Go for it.
Join the club. Join the club. Join the Bitcoin Talk Club.
A new forum sensation is coming to a computer near you. A site that adapts to its users and tailors to altcoins. Are you a coin developer looking for a home? Look no further than the club. Have your own section and moderate it yourself. They're looking for members to help build the club into a one-stop resource for everyone's needs. They're looking for you at bitcointalk.club.
Join the club. Join the club. Join the Bitcoin Talk Club.
All right, so we actually have kind of an interesting dynamic today. I don't know what the sound quality's been like. Maybe you've been hearing these losers in the background, but we have had 2 guests in the studio today.
What up?
Yeah, so they've been around. Like I said, it's been unique. We've been outside, and I've been smoking my cigar and everything. That's the most exciting thing about recording outside. Anyway, so we've had a few buddies here, and just for the heck of it, they've got a few questions. They're not really, well, they're definitely not Bitcoin nerds like Tim and I, and so they might have some basic questions. They might have some questions about what we just talked about. I honestly have no clue, but they said they have questions, so I'm going to let them take it away.
All right, I'm John, but this is for question for Tim and Dan. When more Bitcoins get into the system, do the prices fluctuate in inflation-wise as money would if you put it into the system?
Well, if you're meaning like as they're created, that's kind of built into the system, like a timed out release of the coins. If you're talking about someone who's been like hoarding them and they decide to sell a lot of them real quick, then, or if they sell, I mean, if someone sells a lot or buys a lot, that's going to change the price around. But as far as creating them, as far as new ones coming into the system, it's pretty stable because it's not really someone's choice to do it. It just gets rolled out as the coding runs. It just creates the blocks. So it's more stable than something that where you're just doing like a stimulus package or something like that.
Yeah, I actually remember reading an article, or I don't know if it was an article, Reddit, whatever, but somebody was asking the question, because every 2.5 years or something, the inflation rate gets cut in half. When Bitcoin first started, every 10 minutes, there were 50 Bitcoins added to the system. And then after 2.5 years, that reward got cut in half. Now, every 10 minutes, there are 25 Bitcoins added to the system. And later on, it's going to go to 12.5 and so on. And somebody was asking the question, well, when the inflation rate gets cut in half, shouldn't the price double because they're that much harder to get? And in a sense, I mean, sure, over time, the price could go up as Bitcoins get harder to get, but that it's predictable. And so when that the reward is going to get cut in half pretty much in an instant at some point, they can see that instant coming. And so if the price is going to move, it's not going to happen overnight. It's just as more people want Bitcoin and as eventually the supply goes down, sure, the price will definitely move, but it's not going to be an instantaneous thing. Obviously, it's the same thing we talked about for the whole first half of the show. Who knows? But, you know, it could.
Here, longtime friends. And, Tim was talking about Bitcoin a couple years ago, and back when it was probably like $20-$40 a pop. I really don't remember. But what do you foresee as the longevity of Bitcoin? Because the reason why I don't really want to get into it is because I don't really understand it. Nothing's backing Bitcoin. But, so what do you see the longevity of Bitcoin? Because I don't want to get into it because, every time I hear it, the price is either really high or really low, and that makes me uncomfortable, investing into Bitcoin. And I also feel like the process of investing into Bitcoin is a little bit unorthodox for your average investor. You have to go through back-end markets to, get these Bitcoins, and that concerns me as someone who has never really touched Bitcoin and really never looked into it. So I was kind of wondering your thought process through that, and is Bitcoin going to continue in the future, or, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so actually, in terms of backing, that's been a really interesting aspect. That really is the first question that a lot of people ask. First of all, I would point to the dollar. I mean, honestly, it used to be gold backed. Now it's backed by nothing. It's backed by the U.S. just having power and forcing you to use the dollar. So that's the first thing I would say is the dollar really isn't backed by much of anything at all. But even when it was backed by gold, when you think about it, gold really isn't backed by much of anything either. It's worth a lot of money, but it really has very limited uses. I mean, it's just a little bit rare, maybe, depending on how you define the term rare, but you can put it in jewelry, and I mean, there's random uses for it, sure, and maybe electronics, although that's a lot more silver. But even gold, it's extremely overvalued. I mean, an ounce of gold worth what, $1,200 now? It doesn't actually have that much utility. It's just worth that much because people say that it's worth that much, because people are willing to spend that much for it, and it's not backed by $1,200 worth of value. So yeah, that's what I would say in terms of backing. For longevity, it's kind of similar. I mean, you're right, it is risky, and we've been talking this whole show about if people raise the limit, it could fail. If people don't raise the block limit, it could fail. It's something that people don't know, and it could severely affect the network. So I would never tell somebody that there's no risk to investing in Bitcoin. There absolutely is. So yeah, I'll agree with you there that there is risk. What I would say is, if you have the funds and if you want to invest in it, sure. I mean, it's a risk analysis. If you can do it, go for it. And if you think it could be valuable, whatever. But another thing that we like to point out a lot is just that even completely forgetting the investment purposes, it's easy to use. It's super convenient. It's cheap. It's email for money. It's just on the internet. It's extremely easy to use. So if you really don't trust it, I mean, I would disagree with you, but fine. I'm not going to make you trust it, but you can still use it without really holding it for a long time and trying to count on its value. If you really don't trust its value, there's still a lot of uses for it. I don't know, wherever you want to spend it. I mean, that's actually, I'm sure I've told this story before, but one of the first times I spent Bitcoin was for silver. And a few months earlier, before I had really even heard about Bitcoin, I had bought silver online, and I had to send a check, and I had to wait for the check to get there, and then I had to wait another 10 days for the check to clear. And then they finally shipped my silver. So it was all told, over 2 weeks probably. Well, if you use Bitcoin, and I've done this, a few months after that first purchase I bought with Bitcoin, you send it, it's confirmed within 10 minutes, and they ship it same day or next day. So I mean, yeah, there's a little bit of effort of having to buy the Bitcoin, and there's different risks and costs and stuff. But the point is that there is a whole lot of use even without the investment purposes.
I guess I feel a little overwhelmed looking at investing in a Bitcoin just because I can't go through your conventional means of invest. I can't go through a broker. As far as my knowledge, I can't go through, I can't go to like Access Advisors and you go through a broker and say, I want to invest $2,000 into Bitcoin and get X many Bitcoin. As far as I'm concerned, I don't know if you can do that or not, but I just don't. I feel like I have to go. It's a more convoluted way. I have to go through different channels, back channels. My perception of it. That's the way I see it, is that I have to go a roundabout method, and it just seems to me that it's a hassle, to get these Bitcoins, and that's a problem for me as an investor if I do want to go in these Bitcoins, because I just don't trust these third parties, helping me achieve these Bitcoins. I feel like that's one of my bigger concerns. It's not the value of the Bitcoin itself, but it's, trusting people to give me Bitcoins for, my actual, my US dollar value.
Yeah, no, I mean, in some cases, it is hard. I mean, if you want to do it like a stock, there are Bitcoin like ETF funds that you really could just on some sort of stock system or whatever. You can just add it to your portfolio and buy it through an ETF. There's a few that are out there. They might be private still, but I know the Winklevoss twins have been working on one for a while, stuff like that. But also, in terms of just trusting people out there, if you want to buy Bitcoin directly, the first place I would point you is wallofcoins.com. They're one of our sponsors, and literally I use them every single day, and I would absolutely trust them. I mean, in this case, it is a kind of a roundabout method, like you say, because you have to deposit cash into somebody's bank account. And yeah, I can see how that's kind of roundabout. The most direct way, if you don't want to go roundabout, I would say is Coinbase. I mean, you got to verify and sign up and stuff, but you link your bank account, they take money, and they give you Bitcoin. And then, if you're still worried about trust, you can withdraw your Bitcoin out of Coinbase and keep it yourself. And once you got to wait 3 or 4 days to get the Bitcoin and trust them during that time period, whatever. But once you have it, and they do give you Bitcoin, I mean, I've bought from them before. Once you have it, you withdraw it and you can keep it yourself. And that's a huge thing with Bitcoin and trust, is you can keep your money yourself. You don't have to put it in the bank. You can keep it in your wallet. You can keep it under your pillow. You can keep it in a safe. You can keep it in a safety deposit box at a bank or something. You can distribute it among multiple keys and separate you, Tim, and I could each have a key, and 2 of 3 of them have to be present to make a transaction happen. I mean, that's a huge thing with trust, is you control it. You keep it yourself, and it's great. So, yeah, I don't know. But yeah, so Wall of Coins, if you're willing to deposit cash, go to Wall of Coins. It's an amazing place. If you want to go a little more mainstream.
So for Wall of Coins, how would I get into that? Do I connect them directly to my bank account, or do I buy like Visa credit cards and use that to buy Bitcoin, or how would I get started in purchasing Bitcoin?
Yeah, no, actually, I mean, again, there's a million different ways. You could do credit card with different services and stuff. And like I said, Coinbase links to your bank account. Wall of Coins, though, is kind of incredible because you don't even have to create an account. You go there, you give them your phone number. That's kind of your login. You pick an order, you find a good price and with a bank near you. You pick an order and they'll text you the deposit details. You just go there, deposit, and they give you your Bitcoin. Literally, it can be within half an hour. You could go to their website. You don't even have to create an account. Half an hour later, you could come away with thousands of dollars worth of Bitcoin. And they do. That's, Coinbase, like I said, you got to wait a few days. Wall of Coins, you only have to trust them for those few minutes. They give you your Bitcoin, and then it's in your control. Like I said, you can do anything you want with it. It's your money. Nobody else can touch it. So that's one of the best things about Wall of Coins, is it's extremely quick.
I definitely do like that, like the quickness of it. I don't have to worry about, where's my money at, how long it's going to take to get to me. Where do I purchase items with Bitcoin? Because I just don't know. Like, where would I buy something with Bitcoin? I mean, what trusted site would you guys recommend or use? Because, I mean, just as a novice, I don't necessarily trust I mean, I'm very skeptical, at best. But where would I use that kind of currency?
And there's bigger sites now taking it. Originally, it used to be that you'd have to know someone personally. And I was going to say, after what Daniel was saying, it's less of a... I mean, there's a trust in the system that it's going to work because it's a system that's based on math. It's not going to just quit working because it decides it doesn't like your transaction. But as far as who you're buying from and who you're selling to, it's more of a personal trust, I'd say, normally. Like, there's a lot of... I don't know, it's just more of a personal thing normally when you're buying someone with that because you contact them more normally. As far as where you're spending, I mean, you can use different third parties to spend on places like Amazon, but that's not one of the bigger ones. Probably one of the biggest ones is Overstock.com. They started accepting probably like 2 years ago, which Overstock is kind of just like Amazon's pretty much second to them, I think, as far as the stuff they move. Other places have started accepting it. Different, like, major artists have started accepting it. It's really...
I mean, all right, so you say Bitcoin in the future isn't going to be more institutionalized? Am I going to be able to, go to like a bank and purchase Bitcoin? Because you get the security with like a bank. You go there, you get your money, you deposit your money, you trust that bank. It sounds like with Bitcoin, you still do have to go through that third-party vendor. And like you said, you have to trust them or they have to trust you, to do that transaction. And I'm really looking for more of a, secure, more trustworthy kind of relationship. Do you see that in the future? Are banks going to start accepting it? Or are there bigger vendors out there that almost act as like an institution themselves?
Well, I think part of the problem is, I mean, it's a different currency. It's not just a different product. So it's not like banks are going to accept it. Like U.S. banks aren't going to accept the euro. It's not like a product. Yeah, it doesn't need banks. I mean, there are Bitcoin banks, but you don't need a brick and mortar for that. You just have a website that takes it for people who, for some reason, can't just put it on a paper. But yeah, I think a lot of maybe where the confusion is coming from, and this is why it took them a while to come up with a ruling on it, was that you have to, you look at it as a product, as an investment, but then also as a currency. So really, I can't really give an answer as to where it's going to go. I mean, obviously the hope is that more people accept it, but it's really just open to whoever accepts it. More stuff's coming out, more companies are coming out, making it easier for people to accept Bitcoin, where they don't even have to take on the transaction, the risk of losing money with the transaction. Like, as soon as something's purchased, it gets converted into US dollars worth of the Bitcoin the person spent. So that, like, when Dell takes Bitcoin from someone to buy a computer, they're not holding the Bitcoin. It's immediately getting transferred into how much they spent on that computer or that keyboard or whatever. That much Bitcoin they spent, then it gets converted to dollars right away. So I think that's mostly where you're going to see more growth in the future, is just companies integrating that. And it's not that hard anymore. It's not really that expensive anymore to do stuff like that.
All right. I'm not sure when it's supposed to happen, but in the future, when all of the Bitcoins are supposedly mined, how would the price of Bitcoin be fluctuating during that time when it's all mined?
I think probably what you're talking about as far as like when it gets mined, like the question isn't as much like if the price is going to fluctuate, it's like who's going to run the system anymore, because the point of the mining is they get rewarded for finding stuff that makes the transactions happen. The price wouldn't get affected as much by just that they ran out of Bitcoin getting produced more, at least as far as I'm guessing. It would be that you'd be wondering if people are going to keep on supporting it whenever there's not a reward. Now people are thinking now that instead of getting money from finding blocks, that the transaction fees will go up enough to pay miners, or there are more technologies coming out where they're putting like little mini miners like inside of stuff, like inside of a phone, where it wouldn't really affect they say it wouldn't affect your performance and it would just mine a little bit. Now it's either that or the transactions, or a mixture between the two.
That's pretty good. I think in terms of the price, the goal would be that at that point it wouldn't really change much, or at least very, very slowly, because it's the block reward is supposed to go, well, it's supposed to go to zero around the year 2140, but for years before then it's going to be pretty much negligible, because like I said, it keeps getting cut in half, and I'm sure before that it's just going to be not much at all. And yeah, I guess the goal would be at that point there would be really hardly any price movement. I mean, hopefully it'll slowly rise just as more people use it. As the population increases, then there has to be a more valuable money supply and stuff maybe. But really, yeah, I mean, the hope would be that it kind of just like now with the dollar, long term you can see price changes, but over a few years, the value of the dollar doesn't change a whole lot just because it's a dollar. That's what it is. That's what people use. That's how everything is measured in dollars. Well, if everybody's using Bitcoin, then hopefully instead of having the price of Bitcoin, other things will be priced in Bitcoin. And the price of one Bitcoin really shouldn't change much, I think. Thanks for listening to episode 78. All of the music in today's show was from Jon Stewart. We'll see you for YMB Live next Wednesday and for another regular podcast on Thursday.